We have a big week coming up, August 19th through the 25th, that is continuing some astrology and some energy that started last week. So let's dive in and talk about it. The astrology this week has a lot going on, particularly on the same day as the full moon. On August 19th, we have multiple transits going perfect at the same time. These transits are the full moon in Aquarius, which we already know about. Also, Venus square Jupiter, followed by Venus opposite Saturn in the same day. Just as she's moving, she's hitting these landmarks throughout the day. Because if you're thinking Venus is going to square Jupiter and then immediately oppose Saturn, doesn't that mean that Jupiter and Saturn are talking to each other? Yes, they are. So on this same day, Jupiter and Saturn will perfect their square, which is their first actionable interaction since they conjoined at the 0 degree of Aquarius in 2020, right around that winter solstice. So we have this completion of an opening act that has been happening and unfolding since 2020, kind of marked on this day, on August 19th. So you've probably heard a lot of astrologers on social media talking emphatically about this mutable T-square. And I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like right now. So now that we've gotten a bit of an overview, let's look at the chart. Okay, so what we're looking at is August 19th. I chose the moment that Jupiter and Saturn have their exact square. As you can see, Saturn is retrograde here. Jupiter is direct, which means that while Jupiter is moving forward and is faster than Saturn and was behind Saturn, Saturn is moving backwards. So they're mutually applying to each other. That adds a bit of magnetism to this aspect that's going on. And it is an important aspect just in general. As I said, back in 2020, over in Aquarius, right around where Pluto is now, we had this conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter that began not only a 20-year cycle of Saturn and Jupiter, they take about 20 years to meet up again, typically in patterns of the same element, so in this case air, over a period of 200 years. So we started also a new 200-year cycle of air conjunctions between Saturn and Jupiter. 2020 was, I think we can all agree, kind of a big deal. So it's not really a surprise to hear that the astrology of that year was intense and had a lot going on as well. It is worthy of study and deep dives, and I love it. And it's something that we talk about sometimes in the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom Patreon student study group. So if you're interested in more about that, we do go into it a little bit more in depth in the newsletter that they received this week. So that's something that you can get access to right away there. What we're looking at on this day, of course, you can see lots of things are happening at once. I just listed them out for you, but let's see them on a chart because a lot of astrologers have been talking about this. So what we're seeing is we have our full moon, the moon at 27 Aquarius down here, the sun at 27 Leo up here. And let's start here, right? Let's start with the thing that is closest to us, with the thing that is also going to make all the other things kind of activate a little bit more. We're feeling a full moon this day. And that makes everything else feel a little bit more personal to us because the moon is so close to us. So the full moon has an exact square with Uranus. So we are seeing that this Aquarian full moon that brings progress, that brings intellectual ideas, that brings innovation, and that really seeks to help us understand who we are as an individual in the more collective social scheme is also bringing in change. So Uranus will bring about change. Sometimes that's like a 180 change. It's, I felt like this one day and I feel totally opposite the next. And that's something that's okay. You can give yourself permission to be someone entirely different from one day to the next. And I think that that's something to remember as we go through this week, where we may learn some things, where we may gain some information about society that changes our thoughts and our opinions or helps to formulate them and empower them in one way or another. So that's some stuff to keep in mind with the aspect of the full moon. We also have Mercury retrograde getting just past that interior cazimi with the sun. So they are now separating because Mercury is moving backwards and the sun is moving forwards. And so this opposition of Mercury also says that, again, it might be an overwhelm of information. How do I feel about this compared to what the world is saying and what I'm reading perhaps in the headline? Those are some things that may come up for you around this day. And even if you've been feeling like this for a couple days beforehand and a couple days after, that makes sense too. Don't worry. It's something that doesn't just pop. It is something that builds up culminates and then fades away, like many cycles in life and in nature. So that's the first thing that we can look at is our full moon in Aquarius. But then we think, okay, so much else is happening this day. And a lot of it is centered around the mutable signs. The mutable signs are Virgo, Gemini, Pisces, and Sagittarius. And as you can see, in Virgo, Gemini, and Pisces, we do have some big planet players at work. We've got Venus in Virgo, which is the sign of her fall. It's not her favorite place to be, but she's direct, she's visible, she's doing some work there. We've got Mars and Jupiter having just separated from their conjunction the previous week on the 14th of August. They're both in Gemini. Mars is now in his own terms, so he is considered in ancient astrology to be as strong as he would be in a sign of his own domicile or a sign that he ruled. Jupiter is in the sign of his detriment. He does have elemental or triplicity rulership here. He does have participating rulership over the air triplicity, so there's some oomph there for Jupiter as well. But Gemini is opposite Sagittarius, which means it is a sign of Jupiter's detriment. And then Saturn over here is in Pisces, also retrograde. And Saturn is kind of in a middle ground. Saturn doesn't have any kind of dignity going for them, but they also don't have anything detriment going for them by way of the sign effect. What we are seeing, though, is Saturn is not receiving the friendliest of glances from the other planets. We have this opposition with Venus. We have the square from Jupiter. Mars had perfected the square the previous week, so that's already separating. As you can see, Mars is at 19, Saturn's at 17. So they've already had that conversation and they're moving on. But today, on the 19th of August, we are finding this epochal landmark of Jupiter and Saturn squaring each other. And so here you can see, with everything else taken away, this is that mutable T that everybody keeps talking about. It's called a T-square for the reason that it is almost a perfect box on the chart, but we're just missing that final corner. Otherwise, that would be a grand cross. The moon was there last week, kind of activating that, making it a grand cross. But what we have here is a T-square. It's a half of a square. And so this is just saying that these planets are talking to each other by a quite narrow margin, right? They're pretty close to each other, all within a degree or so of each other. So this is a conversation that is happening that is very energetic. And so that in that we see results for that in our lives as well. So that is our T-square that is happening. And a square between Venus, again, in her fall, Jupiter in his detriment. They're not in their happy places. But again, neither are necessarily the malefics. Mars is probably the strongest one in this. Unfortunately, Mars is separating from all of the aspects that Mars has made. Venus will eventually catch up, and they'll have their square later in the week. That's those two. So you might notice, I think around Wednesday, Venus and Mars will perfect their square, and they'll have that conversation, and we will see what comes of that as well. And of course, Mars is in the stronger position, both because he is considered to be superior in position to Venus, and also because he has more dignity than she does at the current moment. So that's going to be a situation where Mars is maybe a little bit louder and has a little bit more support in whatever comes about from that conversation, from that aspect, in what we see going on potentially in our headlines, but also because it is these two, this may be something that's a little bit more in your personal life. Venus and Mars do tend to move faster, so we see their events unfold a little bit more. So this can feel a little bit more localized to us, and we may even notice this in our personal lives. So when we have Venus and Mars squaring each other, be aware that you may be feeling challenged by other people in your life. Your relationships may have some arguments that come up. Give yourself grace, give yourself patience, follow through with whatever those arguments bring up, see what they're telling you, and then make a wise and educated decision after you've understood the situation more. That's my best advice for something like that. So again, if you're feeling the pressure of this, totally valid. Yes, it is there. And my suggestion for this full moon, the affirmation that I've sort of drawn up based on my interpretation, is I'm empowered in all of my decisions and all of my actions. This is a lot of stuff around you happening and feeling perhaps overwhelming. And so it's really helpful to pull it all back in, draw your energy back in, recall your energy, even if you want to do that as an energetic technique, to recall all of the energy that is out in the world, bring it back to you so that you can say, I make empowered decisions. I take empowered actions. I know me. I know what is important to me. I know what my values are. I know what my boundaries are. And I can make decisions and allowances in my life based on those factors. So I'm empowered in all my decisions and all of my actions. This is, again, a big day, lots of stuff going on all at once. So again, it's a good idea to give yourself the opportunity to take your time with things, to give yourself some free space, to give yourself the opportunity to respond and process. So it might be a good idea to like get ahead of your work a little bit so that you can have extra time that day to observe, to notice. And if nothing else does happen, to just have a rest, which is also great. So I also do know that on this day, there are some pivotal things happening in the United States election process. So I will be watching those headlines. That is something that I will watch and I will share with the student study tier and higher in Patreon. If something goes on, I'll pull apart the astrology and share it in a document that we have there. So if that is something that you're interested in knowing more about and following, I like to really honor people's ability to say, I don't want to be inundated with politics and all that stuff. So I put it in a place where you can find it if it's something you want access to. And again, that is on the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom Patreon, where we do astrology every week, and we also do folk magic every week. Let's talk about ways that we can utilize the energy of August 19th through the 25th using folk magic. So what I'm recommending, since this is a full moon in Aquarius, I used one of my favorite resources, which is the Ozark Mountain Spellbook by Brandon Weston. And according to that, which is really a great combination of astrology and folk magic and using full moons and new moons for amazing charms and spells, Brandon talks about how Aquarius as a sign is most associated with dream magic. So this is a really great week to use this full moon for dreaming, for designing, for long-term vision, for maybe even thinking about how far you've come in the last 6 months and the last 4 years, remembering that we are in this great conjunction cycle as well. The last 6 months, but also the last 4 years, how far have you come? Where are you at? And because it is a full moon, what still feels like it's ready to be released? What still feels like it might be in your way and there's some changes that you're ready to make in order to get to that final destination, to get to that ultimate goal that you're excited about? That is a simple way that you can focus your magical ability, your manifesting ability on that this week. And simply, the most simply, all you have to do is frame your thoughts. Decide and give yourself an affirmation like the one we used for the full moon, which was, I am empowered in all my decisions and all my actions. Even if you just start there, you will be doing magic this week. Magic is in all things. And if you're looking for ways to clear your energy, I recommend things like singing, using a bell, putting herbs in sachets, or if you want to burn some herbs and use the smoke to clear your space, do that responsibly on multiple levels. And you can even do a simmer pot if that's something that you'd like to do. There are many ways that you can cleanse the energy of your space to make sure that all the things you are ready to call in have a place to fill. So I hope that this week is gentle. I hope that you feel empowered, and I hope that everything that we witness together, and that we handle it and respond to it as a unified society, feeling connected to each other more than ever.